Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
intelligence,
voice recognition,
machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Welcome to the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and I am here to help break down topics in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and voice assistant tech to help everyone understand how these technologies are impacting our lives both personally and within our organizations. The Artificial Podcast is brought to you by Red Fox AI. Red Fox AI helps give brands a voice by leveraging the power of AI and voice assistant technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant. If you or your organization is interested in sponsoring an episode, please send an email to the Artificial Podcast at redfox-ai.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you stream podcast episodes. You can also follow the Artificial Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for the Artificial Podcast. Thank you for listening, and now on to this week's episode. Hey there, Artificial Podcasters. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. This week, I am excited to welcome Misha Feigenson from ThinkingCap Innovation to the show. And Misha actually reached out to me on Twitter after I did one of my calls for guests. And this had to have been at least about a month or two ago. But he and I ended up connecting a couple weeks ago, and he filled me in on all of the really neat things that he's up to at his company, ThinkingCap Innovation, the work he's doing in the education sector when it comes to leveraging Alexa to help kids learn languages, and so many cool things. So I'm really excited to be able to chat with him this week. But before I officially invite Misha onto the show, let me tell you a bit about Misha Feigenson. Misha is an educator, physicist, and entrepreneur. In 2012, together with his wife Miriam, he started an app development company to build mobile apps to help young parents like themselves. Their Sound Sleeper app became one of the most popular baby sleep apps in the App Store, with more than 5 million downloads. In 2018, together with Fred Park, a teacher and instructional coach in the Massachusetts public school system, Misha started ThinkingCap Innovation, a startup that uses voice technology and virtual assistants like Amazon Alexa to help students master fundamental math skills and learn languages. As true proponents of screen-free learning, Misha and his team work to bring high-quality and affordable education technology to preschools around the world. Misha, welcome to the Artificial Podcast. How are you?
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thank you for this nice introduction, and I'm very excited to be here. I just make small correction: innovations.
Innovations? I apologize.
Yeah.
ThinkingCap Innovations, everybody, not
Exactly.
innovation. Innovations with the S on the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
Okay.
thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with me here, and I'm really excited to dive into some of the things you're working on, specifically as we look at voice being used in education, and that really seems to be a core part of what you're working on. And there's a lot of discussion right now on how voice can best be used to help children learn new things and be used effectively in education. So I'm really excited to dive into some of that. But to kick things off here, maybe talk a bit about yourself. What has your career journey been like so far? Being a physicist by trade, and then the founder of a successful mobile app development company, and now a voice app development company. What has your journey been like?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, like you said, I'm physicist by education, and about 8 years ago, I left physics. It's actually happened like in many entrepreneurial stories. The company I worked for closed, and I was at home looking for a job. And I just bought an iPhone. I was tinkering with this device. I love programming. So we just got married, and we were expecting our first baby, and we learned about power of white noise. And our son was born, and he was a very bad sleeper. And I just said, okay, let me just build it for ourselves. And so I built a very simple app that played different white noises, and it worked like magic. Like literally, within a few seconds, he was
Wow.
out cold. So like, really, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on
I'm
here?
sure then you knew that it worked, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was like, okay. So we just put it on the App Store, and suddenly, like, it took some time to get off. But what did happen right away is I started receiving love letters from other parents.
Wow.
And that was very like, wait a minute, I'm like, as physicists usually don't get love letters.
Right.
Like you're more engaged with the devices and microscope and things like that. And so I never went back to physics. I said, you know what, I always wanted to do my own stuff and my own thing, and that's probably the moment. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah, you're right. Your story sounds quite similar to a lot of others I've heard as well, where it's like, well, we have this problem for ourselves, might as well fix it, and then you find out through that process, oh wait, millions of other people have this problem too.
Right, exactly. And it's actually what interesting. It's this app. It's actually very typical again for entrepreneurial journey. We started it was a very simple app at the beginning, and we started adding features as we went through. So like I showed it to some friends who came over, and they said, "Oh, look at this." Like we all have babies, and like they came with the baby like very fuzzy now. Son is like quietly like chilling out, and he said, "Oh, okay, not a big deal. I want to see this app in the middle of the night. Put him to sleep by itself, so I don't have to wake up." I said, that's an interesting idea. So I built this feature that listens to the baby, and if baby starts crying, start playing this common sound by itself. So you actually physically don't have to come. And this was like, oh my gosh, it actually works.
Yeah.
So and then we started adding more features, but that was actually every feature that we added was really from personal need or experience was talking to people. So
yeah, no, that's fascinating, and of course, especially as you develop something like a mobile app, and even as we talk about voice here, making sure that you're actually hitting on the pain points that are affecting the people that you're building what you're building for, it actually happens. That's just a testament, I think, to being open-minded and actually going to people who could have this similar problem, be like, hey, what else can we add to this to make it better? So that's really neat. I'm really glad to hear that it worked out so well for you, and I'm assuming it's still. I mean, are you still getting downloads on the App Store? Have you checked any of that? Or is it still quite popular? What you built?
Yeah, it is quite popular. Yeah, and we actually come now in we going as we continue going with this journey. Is our oldest now in the fourth grade. I stopped for a second to calculate his grade. Yeah, he's in the fourth grade. So now we need features. So I'll go. That will be transitioned to Alexa actually, but also to continue to sound sleeper. Now we actually thinking we have now meditations and kid meditations, something that will help kids to calm down, be more calm, and so I can tell you the continuation of this journey actually very smoothly led us to Alexa, because what happened now, oldest son who inspires our first company, he started first grade, and he was struggling with math. And around same time, we bought Alexa, and again, the same story. I was tinkering with device. I was trying to understand how it works, how I can program for that. And as I was doing it, I was observing my kids playing with this thing. And it's so interesting. So there are a few interesting observations. First of all, I was amazed to see how they interact with Alexa. So for them, talking to machine feels like talking to a real person. So they can laugh with it, they can get upset with it. And I said to myself, well, that's very interesting. It's probably if I build something educational, it will feel to my kids that they talk to a real teacher. So it's very interesting observation. But even more powerful observation was this multitasking. They could actually interact, and later when I built something and they started testing it, I, of course, testing everything on my kids. So when I started working on this, and as they do math with Alexa, they actually do other things while they do this. So, uh, so that I could see them. So it was enough, like we're sitting on the carpet, just enough to put in front of them box of Lego, and they start like without saying anything and starting Alexa, and they do math while building the Lego castles or something. So that's so powerful because it often happens that our playtime and homework time, educational time, they're in competition with each other. But
Wow.
it doesn't have to be this way. We can do same think at the same time, both things at the same time. So that's something very powerful. And the third and most appealing thing to me was there's no screen.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think right now, after more than half a year of pandemic, we don't have to convince anybody about negative things that can come from the screen, especially for
Right.
kids. But we actually raise our kids without screens. We don't have TV. We don't have computer games. Like we're very, very strict about it. I don't know how long we'll be able to continue
Right.
this. Yeah, we'll see. Our oldest now 9, so we'll see. We still have probably a few years we can continue. We'll see. But the bottom line, this no screen policy is very strong in our family. And that's something that's talked to me really, because this interaction. And why is that? Because when you interact with a computer via screen, you're hypnotized. Like you are not really thinking, you're not really reasoning, you're not really using your brain in a full way. You're led by this technology. But when you get rid of the screen, you suddenly start thinking. You start using your imagination. You start, so it's like completely different way of like I'm for it. It's like so I said, okay, so that's something I want to do. So I was as I said, my son was struggling with math. So I was thinking, can I use this technology to help him with math? So that's how this project started. So at the same time, I talked to the math teacher in the school where he studied, Fred Park, and who became my very good friend and a partner and co-founder in this project. Fred is in charge of all the educational content on our program. So we decided to go for it. When I first talked to him, he was like, he almost jumped through the roof. He was like, oh my gosh, I was waiting for this technology for 20 years. You don't understand.
Yeah.
It's like when you bring, and actually that's this phrase I heard not only from him, but from many other teachers I interviewed when I talked to many teachers trying to understand how do you use technology in the classroom. I tried to understand what the place of the technology, and the most, you can't believe it, but the most like I heard from so many teachers this phrase, I hate computers in the classroom. So because, and why is that? And then it just open the door and they like start talking, like, because they don't learn anything, they only play, and it's only about this flying cows,
right,
and
to your point that you just made about screen interface and what that does while you're engaging with it versus voice only.
Yeah, it just becomes a game. You just collect another point, you just want to see the bing, you just all the look, you always, every second you distracted from thinking from so when you get rid of this, suddenly it becomes very powerful educational tool.
That is that's a really interesting story. And yet again, I like how through the power of observation is really what led you to what you're working on at ThinkingCap. Observing how your children were learning math, and you're like, with us being a screenless family, how can I help him learn math more efficiently? And then that led you to voice, which I just think is absolutely fascinating. And I'm not shocked at all when you said that when you were talking to teachers, they said that they cannot stand screens in the classroom, which is funny because you look at a majority of school systems now in the US and probably around the world who are issuing Google Chromebooks like their textbooks, right? Yeah. It's almost like what teachers don't like is almost just it's being forced no matter what. So I've really thought a lot of, go ahead.
Yeah, I recently was in the I recently was in the supermarket and I see the huge advertisement. Kids need more computers for Zoom. Like donate money to get my more computers for Zoom. I'm like, no, you won't get my money for Zoom because Zoom is a great company, but the educational value of Zoom teaching is zero, in my
Right.
opinion. Like looking at my kids. So no, that's not the way to go.
Right.
No.
No, that's really interesting. So, of course, you just kind of went into the story about how you and Fred came up with Thinking Cap Innovations. So, with Thinking Cap Innovations, has your focus always been on children? Or are you looking to expand beyond helping children learn things like language and math and other skills? Are you looking to expand that to, maybe more adolescents and adults? Or has the focus just always been on children? And then maybe aside to that question, I guess, what has stood out to you about the way that children interact with voice assistants like Alexa and Google Assistant?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So since everything I did was sort of what the catalyst behind the ideas with my own experience, um, when we saw the power of this voice technology with math, yeah, and maybe I would say that we started with math um, because first of all, because I wanted to help my children. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
But the second thing, technologically speaking, it's very easy to do math because you know that the answer that you get is always a number,
Right.
and you don't have to guess what user said. You just it's a number. Like you have to interpret it if that's the number
Right.
you
There is
expected
an
to
answer
get,
no
or that's
matter
the number.
what.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah, but that's a number. It's easy. It's not something else. If it's not a number, you just have to ask again until you get
Right.
the number. So that's the thing. But as more we worked with this, as more I thought about this, um, I couldn't help but thinking of other application which could be so powerful, in that learning languages, and that of course not only limited to children but to any age. And I'll tell you how I got to this idea. It also was inspired by my kids, but first it came from my experience actually learning German a few years ago. I was trying to learn German like maybe 5, 10 years, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't know. We together with my wife, we're trying to learn German together. And the way we did it, we were listening to podcasts. There's a great podcast by Deutsche Welle. It's a German sort of equivalent of BBC, and they put together this amazing course, which probably they created, I guess, about 20 years ago. I think it was first in cassette tapes, and now later they moved into DVD, and now it's on a podcast. But material is amazing. So, and it has a plot, and there's people talking. So I was listening to this every time, everywhere I went, I was listening to this podcast. But what happened to me all the time, I wanted to repeat after them. So there's a plot there, and the people talk, and so I wanted to be part of this conversation. So every time I ended myself pressing stop button and just repeating the thing after them, and then pressing play again. And I said, why didn't I wish I could talk to them. I wish I'd be part of this conversation. So that's something was sitting for many years, this thing. And then another thing, so what actually pushed me to this, my kids switched schools, and in the old school they were, where they went, they studied Spanish, and in the school where they go now, there's no Spanish. So they were, we spent too much time learning Spanish, now we can't, there's no Spanish here. And I said, okay, look, let's see if I can come up with something to help you. So again came this idea, let me see if I can create something. So the bottom line, when we study, we can, of course, you can ask, wait a minute, so what new can you do with Alexa? Then something like Rosetta Stone didn't create, right?
Right.
Or Duolingo. How can you innovate in this field when there are such big players? And here, what I think about this, most of us, when we come to learn a new language, what we really want to do, we want to learn how to speak.
Hmm.
uh, Most of us, like I know my wife, she's a linguist. She, when she's stressed, she take a book of Russian grammar to calm down. But that's very rare person. Like most of the people not interested in the grammar, people
Right.
just want to speak. uh,
I
um,
can attest to that because when I was in high school and I was taking Spanish courses, I
yeah,
really the worst part was learning how to write in the grammar. I didn't care about the writing and the grammar.
exactly.
I just
Hmm.
wanted to speak the language. And
That's
honestly, I probably would have done
exactly
much
that.
better in those courses had I just had it just been focused on speaking versus the writing part of it as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. And when we look at the even such a popular program like Duolingo, what you come up will end up having they don't teach you how to speak. Okay, they have like exercises of conversational exercises, but it's very minor part of their curriculum. So uh, they focus most of the online company language learning companies. They teach you, everything you should know, like the grammar and how to build sentences and whatever. But today, but what Alexa can bring in this to this space is this ability to have conversational exercise, to have conversation with machine, and this is super powerful. So we created this program. We started with teaching Spanish, and we called it ThinkingCap Spanish. So our math program called ThinkingCap Math, and this is called ThinkingCap Spanish. And the idea behind ThinkingCap Spanish is that it's interactive storytelling. So there's little reader. So the story is for kids, but it's actually works as well for adults as for kids. So it
Hmm.
just makes it very fun, and the story is actually very ridiculous and funny. Exactly, it has to be the way it has to be in order to catch attention. So there's a little Red Riding Hood and there's Gingerbread Man, and they all meet in this forest, and there's a conversation between them, and you part of the conversation, and they have some
Interesting.
conversation, then they tell you, okay, now repeat after me. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás? Okay, great. Now and you repeat after them and you continue. And then they said, okay, now imagine you meet, wait a minute, here's someone running. Let's ask him, where is he from? And you're like, okay, so how do you say? Go ahead. And you're like, oh, the don the okay. So it's really you're becoming part of this
Hmm.
conversation, part of the story.
That's a really interesting way to approach that too, because of course, of the last few years, this the the whole concept of storytelling and going back to kind of the roots of how humans communicate. There's been so much scientific research done that show that we communicate the most effectively when we tell stories, and people
Right.
remember things when they're conveyed through story.
Exactly.
So I think
Exactly.
just alone, this is an approach to learning language that I have not seen or heard before. I
Yeah.
definitely, I used Rosetta Stone many years ago, but I don't remember that being a part of their platform. I can't say the same for Duolingo because I haven't used it, but I just think the concept that you've come up with here, where you're immersing somebody in an interactive story and creating
Yeah.
almost that muscle memory, I think
Right.
that is really fascinating.
Yeah. I have a funny sort of memory when I was in the grad school. I was used to teach a lot, and I remember once I was teaching a class on something in math analysis. I don't remember exactly, but the idea was that you have to solve a series of differential equations. And in the first lesson, I remember it's very boring course, and like kids like very trying to escape it.
Right.
But I remember that I came to the classroom and I said, "Look at this! I drew a picture of a huge." Um, like big animal, and I said, look, remember, imagine yourself that you starting now, you finish this degree, you start a new job, you land your dream job, which is working for the company. Now your first assignment, here's this huge animal, scary animal, and you have to write a program that makes this animal move. And now we'll write equations and we'll put strings inside and we'll connect the strings and we will make it move and we'll solve these equations. So that was became very fun lesson. But a few years later, I met someone and who was in this class. She said, "You know what? I was in your class. I don't remember anything, but I remember the story of this huge animal, and I remember this equations we used to solve." So really, stories that's what stick with us, and that's
Yeah,
what makes.
stories and song. I can say this the same thing and relate to that. Even as far back as like seventh grade for me, I remember
Mhm.
my science teacher going over like I think it was we were covering something in biology, and she was going over like kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, and in
Mhm.
no other situation in my life would I ever have to remember that. But she started banging on the counter over and over again in a rhythm, going kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And she kept doing it. And then we all repeated.
Nice.
And I have never forgotten
Right.
that. Also, back in
Right.
music class, when I was in elementary school, this was probably second or third grade, there was this song naming all of the 50 US states. And I still remember that song word from word today. So it's
Right.
it's
Right.
it's really fascinating that this is your approach to all this because it's really honing in on the ways that human beings remember things and can recall information.
Yeah.
And we do that through story and music. So I think your approach here is
Yeah.
just
And
so
by the way,
fascinating, Misha.
yeah, thanks, Nick. And I want to add to this that actually, when you look at the kids, how they learn a language, it's something very interesting. Although, of course, it's not really scientific. The way I'm sure the way kids learn language is very different. Like there's whole theories about how children learn languages, but there's something very interesting if you look at the children learn languages. What happens? That first of all, we never teach them grammar. That's first thing we never. And another thing, we never correct them. We just talk back to them in the correct way, and then hear it correct way, and then repeat after us.
Hmm.
Um, and so what we do, we actually talk. So this principle of just don't teach grammar, don't correct them, just let them talk and listen, hear how what's the correct way to speak, and keep them going, keep them talking, and that's what brings great results.
Yeah, that's insanely fascinating. So what has the reaction been like from, the children that have used Thinking Cap Innovation skills on Amazon Alexa? What are some of the results that you've seen so far from both maybe Thinking Cap Math and Thinking Cap Spanish?
Yeah, so we actually released, so in the Thinking Cap Math, we started a little bit more than half a year ago. And our first approach was that, first of all, we didn't really know who our customers. We thought our first initial idea was that the parents would be our customers, uh, our users. But what we very fast figured out that parents just don't have time.
Hmm.
Because parents, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, but that most of the time parents are looking for babysitters, something that will keep child quiet. And unfortunately, they go for YouTube and other things that will keep child quiet for a longer time.
Right.
Um, so so you bring so it's very difficult to engage with parents because for them they look for something different. But teachers, when we talk to teachers, the more we talk to teachers, we saw that there's uh, very big interest among the teachers. And and our first audience was special education students. And in the special education, we chose this visual impaired student. So that was something very, very special. It actually was the idea of someone. I was in some conference in London presenting the Thinking Cat Math, and someone came up to me and said, "Wait, did you try it with blind kids?" I said, "That's a very interesting idea." So I came home, and I googled like all like many schools for visually impaired kids and send emails, and 10 people got back to me just same day. We're in. So like you never hear this kind of response, like because this particular group of teachers and students, they don't have any other technologies that can help them.
Right.
So we partnered with several schools which work with kids with visual, which work with students with visual impaired student, and that was absolutely amazing experience. So the one of the things we asked them is to send us recordings, audio recordings of the kids interact with the program so we can improve the program. And listening to this recording was absolutely amazing experience. I think I laugh at this that so we our products at this point, they are free products, so we still don't have any profits, and we're bootstrapping the company. So, but if I could go to the store, if I could buy milk with satisfaction I get from this, I could probably be independently wealthy at this point, because the amount of satisfaction you get. So I'll give you an example. I was listening to one of the recordings from one of the schools, and they work with the program. There's a group of kids that work in the program, and at the end of the session, the teacher asks, "So, would you like to say something to the developer?" And like one girl says, "Thank you for building ThinkingCap Math for us."
Wow.
And I was like, that's
like, tear jerking.
No. Thank you. Yeah, I was like crying. I was literally had tears in my eyes. This kind of thing, when you look at the most vulnerable group of students who have, and they take it so personally, and they see such a huge value. So it was like, oh my gosh. So thank you. Thank you. Really.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what's interesting too about voice technology, right? Like, of course, there's so many different opportunities for anybody who wants to dive in and figure out a way to leverage this for a variety of different purposes. But one of the areas that has consistently always gotten attention that I'm shocked people don't invest in as much, it seems, is the accessibility part of voice, right? Like the fact that this can help so many people who are blind accomplish things that they could never hope to accomplish before, or people who have motor skill impairments and the ability for them to accomplish things easy with their voice.
Exactly, or kids who have troubles with reading or writing.
Yes.
So there's so much.
I think accessibility is such an untapped marker for this, and I even have been told by numerous people who aren't even in this space, who are like, there's a lot of opportunity for anybody who chooses to go the accessibility route over the long term. So that's why I also think, as in our pre-conversation we had a few weeks ago, when you told me how you were partnering with some special education schools and some of the results you were getting, I'm like, that is an incredibly smart move, because not only are you actually helping people and you get feedback like that, but there's millions of people out there who deal with different disabilities that this technology can benefit. And I'm sure the feedback that you're getting from even these schools you partnered with can only be used to help improve what you've built to even serve more people, which is even better in my opinion.
Yeah, and usually it's interesting that usually what works for special education works for anybody else. Like it's usually a group of, because they're such a difficult group, but if you manage to help them, you can help anybody. So that's also
absolutely.
So maybe that's a place to say, if one of your listeners will looking to partner with someone who in the field, if someone wants to some kind of partnership, that's maybe a place to say we are looking for partnerships.
Yes, absolutely. I'll echo that and say, to what you just said, Misha, if anybody who's listening right now has any connections in the special education space, or anything that has to do with disability or accessibility, please reach out to Misha here to learn more about what he's working on and maybe partner, because this can really help so many people. So with that being said, we talked a bit about, how what you've built differs from Rosetta Stone or Duolingo, but are there any other advantages that you've been able to come across, whether that is learning a new language? Of course you have ThinkingCap Math, but what are some of the other advantages of Amazon Alexa versus some of the other platforms out there for language learning, like Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, any others that help you learn math that have existed in the market for much longer? What are some of the advantages you've been able to really see?
Yeah, look, that's very interesting. That's actually a big question, and what I found out that I wasn't aware of this, but there's something, this field in math called mental math. Now, mental math is our ability to do math in our head without
Mm-hmm.
paper, without calculator. And it turns out that there's a big research, there's actually a few researchers that show that our ability to do math in a young age in our head, that what finds our ability to acquire high-level math. So it means that if you know how to count, do math quickly, and effectively, efficiently in your head while you're young, you have a good chances finishing high school and getting into college. So that's how it is. So we literally, with this technology, literally, like I like saying it to myself, we actually helping putting kids into college by
Yeah,
allowing
that's
them to
incredible.
master this skill. Yeah. So that's also something I think is very powerful to remember.
Oh, absolutely. And I,
Yeah.
even looking at myself growing up, I was one of those students where I was really good when it came to English and reading and writing and, even science to some degree. But when it came to just math, I always struggled. And I truly look back on that. And I think I'm not even so much sure it was just my inability to comprehend mental math as much as it was the way that we were being taught mental math and the way to go
Yeah.
about memorizing and understanding the math itself. And I've reflected a lot on that as I've gotten older. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at, even just, multiplication and divisions, doing some of that in my head. But I look back when I was younger and I've really thought about why did I hate math so much? And I really can not that it was the direct fault of the teachers, but it was just the approach to it was just so off base from how I learned. And I think about if there was something like
Yeah.
what you've built here with ThinkingCap Math when I was younger, if that maybe would have changed things for me, because it would have been a really interactive, off the cuff, immersive way to learn something that really to some people isn't that exciting, right? Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of where what I've been thinking about as we've been talking about this is there's so many kids out there who just do not like math. I'm not even sure that they're just not good at it. I just think the approach to teaching them it is somewhat flawed, and I think that's where something like what you've built here can really serve a need.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. The power of this voice technology in this field is because it feels like I mentioned to you that it feels to us, and especially for kids, that they're talking to a real teacher when they interact via voice. So this device can say exactly things that the real teacher would say. So I'll give an example of real power of voice technology here. Imagine Alexa asks you how much is 6 plus 7, and the student says like 16. So Alexa can, well, let's see. If 6 plus 6 is 12, how much is 6 plus 7? And this is super powerful because that's something that screen would never will be able to do.
Right.
That's like really making you think and making you teach.
It is. I just thought even when you said that, just because you prompted it.
Yeah. Right. And that's exactly. And by the way, you can divide. That's one of the things I really have a real joy of doing when I work on this. It's like designing this Alexa conversation because there's so much you can. Like I remember I showed it to someone and he said, "Wait a minute! It sounds like it speaks a real person. It doesn't sound like a computer." I said, "Yes, because I spend hours of calculating every pause, every
Right.
millisecond that it stops and thinking, because it really allows you to create like it feels like a real teacher, like exactly like you
Right.
said. Yeah. So you see this power of this thing. That's something that screen will never be able to do.
Right.
Like I just made you think, right? I just taught you something based on something you knew before. So that's the real power of this technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, how do you envision the future of voice technology? Do you think it will kind of stay where it's been, where it's just a couple of platforms like Alexa and Google and Bixby and some of these others that just kind of maintain most of the market? Or do you think it'll at some point extend beyond these few platforms into an ecosystem where there's hundreds, maybe if not thousands of different voice assistants. How do you envision the future of this technology?
Look, the only thing I probably can look what happened in mobile, like to be more, so to learn from the what happened in the past. And in the beginning, there were more players, and it ended up having two major players.
Right.
Here, I hope, like we are, of course, just in the very beginning, I hope there will be more than two.
Right.
Because
I do too.
The more players, the more players out there, I think I'll feel more safe about that this information won't be used in like, like I'm a big fan of Yuval Noah Harari, the historian, and I heard his lecture. He said some phrase. He said, like, we are much better in creating technology rather than using it.
Yes, we are.
So when so start using technology, that's so I think it will. If I will know that there are more than two, I'll feel more safe about what's happening in this field.
Yeah,
I agree
with you.
Yeah, and maybe talking about safety, it's also a very relevant question to the schools, because these devices weren't created for the schools; they were created for the education. So when this kind of thing comes to the school, teachers look very suspiciously to this device. Although every teacher has a phone in their pocket while they're teaching, and this Google Assistant and Siri listening at the same time. So, like, what are they listening for? We don't know, but it feels to us. I think we also, but we ask the question, and rightly so. We ask all these questions about privacy, and there's a lot we can do in this field. Like, for example, like I work more closely with Alexa. So in Alexa, for example, you can disable, like when you work in school, for example, you can disable recordings, you can disable voice recognition. You say you can protect yourself in a very good way, I think, which can be very good for schools. But something very interesting happened now with pandemics, because now, like when we talked to schools in a half year ago, most of the questions were like about security or weight, and okay, that's fair questions, and they have to be addressed. And there's a way to, like I said, there's a way to protect yourself in a good manner. But now the questions are very different. Now, when we talk to schools, now we talk to districts, questions are different. Questions are like before that, people were saying, it doesn't have a screen. What can you do with a screen? Now the question is, it doesn't have a screen. Interesting. That's interesting. And it only costs $30 for the whole classroom.
Right.
Double. And so that's with this pandemic, with this situation currently, and you say it's also touch free, so children don't have to touch this technology.
Right.
That's free. So that's completely. We are in a completely different place. And I believe you asked me what I think will happen with this. I think we're truly in a place where schools will realize the huge educational potential of this technology. They will learn how to overcome security issues, and they will. But once they do this, I think this device will have its place in the classroom. Like, I have no doubt it will be like we have computers today in the classroom. I'm sure every classroom will have Alexa.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And that's the thing, because compared to screens, there really is no learning curve to it. So if you have a voice assistant in a classroom, and whether or not the teacher decides to utilize that in some capacity to kind of augment the curriculum, I think that's only going to help students understand some of the information better. Especially, I think, if more companies like yourself decide to take that story approach and you use the voice assistant to maybe kind of have more of an immersive experience with the class, because that's what they'll remember. They'll remember the stories and being involved in that. And that's exactly what voice technology can do. And again, I agree with you. And I think to a lot of us who work in this space day in and day out, it seems like we've been in it forever, but to the rest of the world, it's still so new. It's still so early, and there's still so much green space to build the future with it. So,
and this, like you said, to be immersed in this thing, is that exactly what it is? This multitasking, this ability. You don't have to stop your class, and you don't have to surrender to this device called screen.
Right.
This thing is part of you. You just talk to it, and you have a question you ask. And today, even I don't even talk about our program, but teachers today, there's a blueprint that teachers can create their own programs. And so it's I think it's no-brainer that it will be in the classrooms.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, Misha, as we kind of wrap things up here, I just want to say this has been an incredibly fascinating conversation, and I'm so happy to hear about the results that you've seen so far. And again, that story you told just a bit ago about the feedback you got from that child who's is blind and use it. I mean, that's the type of stuff I'm sure that just keeps you going to get feedback like that. So I really think you've just kind of, you're at the tip of the iceberg here with how deep you can go with what you're building. And I'm really excited to stay in touch and see where things go.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And if anybody wanted to reach out to you or get in touch with you, what are some of the best ways for them to go about doing so?
Just Google us at ThinkingCap, or our website, www.thinkingcapinnovations.com. or just directly our Twitter or Facebook, or also directly to me, Michael at thinkingcapinnovations.com. So if you're interested in partnerships, or your school district or teachers, we would love to hear from you.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to include some of those links in the episode notes as well, so people can have them. But otherwise, Misha, thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with me. I'm really excited for folks to get to hear this episode, and I'm looking forward to keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. It was great fun. Thank you.
Yep, take care.
Artificial intelligence, voice recognition, machine learning, robotics.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host, Nick Myers. To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.